Goodbye, everybody, and unwelcome to another episode of DC Legends Bizarro Style. I am not your host, Bizarro, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Matty Bo, or Vote Detective Chimp, the co-leader of Bizarro's #1 Alliance.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on, man. We had been talking for a while about doing a video on raid strategies and tips, and we thought we would go ahead and do that with a raid upcoming. And so there were just a litany of topics we wanted to talk about. And I think, didn't this really come about because we realized that more people didn't know things we thought they knew than we thought. Did I say that right?
I believe so, but there's some things that maybe we, as kind of more active players, kind of take for granted in raids that some more casual players maybe didn't know, and that was kind of surprising to me. But uh, it's good to know that some people didn't know those things, so now we can shine a light on them.
Exactly. And the other thing I was going to say is so Bizarro's #1 Alliance has been top 10 in raids ever since the start of raids. And I say that not to brag, but to give us credibility because Vote Detective Chimp and I have been the ones really running the Alliance along with the help of our officers. And so, what I want to do is give us some credibility so that if you're listening to this audio recording or the YouTube video of this, then you feel like there's some credibility to what we're about to say. So where we wanted to start was, unless you had anything you wanted to say, Matt.
Not right now. I think we can get into it.
All right. So where we wanted to start with Wade characters, with raid characters. And we were going to start with talking about bonus tunes and whether to use bonus tunes, when to use bonus tunes. And what we thought we would do is just start with this month. So this is going to be the July raid for 2020. We thought we would start with the raid tunes for this month. And we're not trying to give a review of what we think, but we're more trying to use them as an example for how you should think about every raid, not just this raid. So, why don't you open it up? We'll just go by affinity, physical, mystical, energy, and we can talk about some of the different tunes, and, what our thoughts are on using them.
Sure. So I'll just go ahead and list all the bonus tunes for this raid. For the physical tunes, we have Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn, Quite Vexing, and Penguin. For our mystical tunes, we have Raven, Dr. Fate, and Ocean Master. For the energy tunes, it's all lanterns. So we've got Kilowog, Guy Gardner, and Medfill, or Broccoli, if you will.
Yep. So if you hear us refer to broccoli, we're talking about Medfill. Um, you know, I think these tunes are a good example of how a player should be thinking about raids and bonus tunes because I think sometimes the belief is just let me throw in all the multiplier tunes and put in the highest ones I can that I have leveled up, and that's the way to go. But it's actually not the way to go.
Exactly. And you also get some people that get dejected right at the beginning when they don't have any of these bonus tunes. And I think it's important to kind of point out that the bonus tunes aren't always going to be the most useful.
Yeah, I mean, so using one example, if you look at Penguin, for example, now my Penguin is 7011, but there's no way I'm bringing him into battle because he's a support tune, he is a low damage tune, and raids are all about how much damage can you do in the shortest amount of time. So I don't want to be wasting precious seconds on Penguin.
Exactly.
And I think, and you can tell me whether you agree or not, because I haven't really used some of these tunes a lot, but a lot of these other tunes fit into the same category. So like Ocean Master, for example, is not a high damage tune.
Not at all. So Ocean Master would kind of fit into a different category that I would think of if you're at a higher level and still trying to look to just fill out your roster, maybe Ocean Master might be something that you look at because he's a useful character in general, but not he's not going to do anything for us in raids. Almost
Yeah.
nothing.
So what you're saying is
And
basically,
the same would be true for Penguin and Poison Ivy, where they're gonna do fine outside of raids for your PvE or your PvP content. They're not bad tunes, so but they're just not useful in raids.
yeah, and I think if somebody's goal as a player is to use raids as an excuse to upgrade some tunes, then that's fine. But in our alliance, we never put pressure on players to upgrade bonus tunes that they don't want because we know that some of these tunes don't have value. And in that regard, actually, let's talk about a different way a tune might not have value. And I think Medfill is a good example of this. You and I were talking about Medfill before we started recording. Do you want to talk about Medfill and why we thought he's not the best tune for raids?
Sure. So first, I just want to say I really like Bill's rework. The turn meter manipulation that he adds is kind of great. But one thing that you and I had talked about for Raid specifically is he has four different moves, and only one of them does damage. And the AI will hardly ever choose that move. So you're wasting lots and lots of time and animation on your raids on attacks that don't do any damage. So one thing that we wanted to kind of point out is think about the animation times of your tunes and how the AI kind of chooses their moves for them.
Yeah, because Medfill's going to spend a lot of time putting strength downs or putting um, damage immunity on somebody instead of doing damage. And what you want is you want your characters to be doing damage and doing damage quickly. Um, to shift gears again, though, I think Harley Quinn Quite Vexing is an example of a bonus tune that is highly valuable because she's a pure damage dealer. Um, she does really heavy damage, especially on her the move where she draws the gun. And to me, that's the kind of character I want to bring into raids because I'm just looking to do damage.
Exactly. And she has some other benefits that we'll get to in a little bit. But
Yeah,
yeah, she's just fantastic. And people wouldn't necessarily think about working on her because she has limited value in PvP, but in raid she's going to be fantastic, especially at a high multiple.
yeah. Then there's, I feel like there's this sort of leftover category where you don't really know how certain tunes are going to do. Um, you may have a general sense, like Raven and Dr. Fate would fall into that for me.
Yeah,
Um,
there's always going to be somebody that surprises you, I think, and my guess is this raid it's probably going to be raid, but I wouldn't go I wouldn't go out of my way to gear up Raven if you don't already have her.
yeah.
I doubt she's going to much of a difference, but if you do have her, I think there's a good chance that she's going to be able to do some decent damage against those green bosses.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a good segue into the other tunes that we wanted to talk about because we started off by saying that you don't necessarily have to use bonus tunes, and in fact, there are some bonus tunes that you don't want to use, like Penguin. And so that's a nice segue into talking about tunes that we thought were good in every raid. In other words, these are tunes that you would think about upgrading not just for one raid, but to have them in your tool belt for every raid. And we sort of divided them up into different categories like calling assists or debuffs or buff. And then we have some more staple tunes. And we can just go in order. We can start with the call assist tunes because it's a nice segue with Harley Quinn Quite Vexing. Because not only is she a heavy damage dealer, she does call assist as well. So do you want to, Matt? Do you want to talk a little bit about the value of call assist tunes and why some of them are really valuable for raids?
Sure. So if you do have some characters that maybe don't do a lot of damage, so somebody like maybe a Hal Jordan, where he's going to be able to put some debuffs on the other team and keep your team shielded, his first basic attack will call assist from another tune. So you're getting a free attack along with it. What's great about Harley Quinn is in addition to her high damage, her own buff move, if you have it ranked up, is a double call assist. So not only will it turn the enemy turn meter down, but it will give you 2 free attacks on your raid boss.
Yeah, and I think you hit it spot on, which is the idea that the more extra turns that you can get before the boss can take a turn, the better, because you're trying to do as much damage in the minute to minute and a half that you have. And to be able to get 2 extra turns can often get one of your high damage dealers 2 extra turns that make a lot of difference.
Right.
The other one that I think is really valuable is Hippolyta. She also has a double call assist move. I don't think the double call assist is guaranteed, but it's a pretty high percentage to call the second assist. And Hippolyta has some other value too that we'll talk about in a second. But being able to get yourself some extra turns is really important. Then let's talk about debuff tunes. Unless there was anything else you wanted to say about call assist.
No, just keep in mind the more free turns you get, the better.
Yep. So let's talk about debuff tunes. Really, I think both of the debuff tunes that we had put on our list were tunes that both serve the same function, which is to apply agility downs, because the more agility downs you can get on a raid boss, the more damage you can do, because you're basically lowering the defense of the raid boss. So I'll take the first one if you don't mind. One tune that sort of surprises people as a staple for raids is Riddler. And the reason is Riddler can put a lot of intelligence downs, he can put a lot of agility downs, he can even stun, and he falls back into that first category of being able to call assists. So a lot of times his turn is not a wasted turn of just applying debuffs to lower the defense of the boss, but he actually gets you that extra damage as well. So he was one that he kind of surprised me. I don't know how he was for you, but he surprised me as being one of the staples for raids.
Yeah, I remember when I kind of learned that secret a few raids ago. I would have never thought to use Riddler in raids. And then somebody told me about him, and it completely changed the way that I played. It's almost like an easy button against some of those blue bosses,
Yeah.
and even some of the red bosses.
Yep. So there are folks out there who may not have Riddler. Riddler is not a common character by any stretch. In fact, he was one of the few that I did not have above Legendary 2 in my own personal collection of tunes. So we talked about an alternative for people who don't have Riddler.
Yeah, and that is Green Arrow Emerald Archer. And that is a character that's in the campaign, so pretty much everybody has him. If you don't have him geared up, you should. He's just that good. But his team leader ability is great. It will turn the enemy turn meter down constantly. But his first will constantly put down ability downs on enemies, which just softens them up for your heavy damage dealers. And Arrow doesn't do bad damage on his own. So
Right. Yeah, and because he himself is not the only one who can put agility downs with that legendary ability. Teammates can
your
too.
whole team do it.
Um, so the next category that we thought of like tunes that are good for every raid are heavy buff tunes. Um, you want to start this one off because you're the big lantern fan, so I want to give you the lantern.
But, well, I think the kind of obvious one is going to be Arcus. He is going to be useful in every raid, whether he's a bonus tuner, because a lot of times once you start throwing all those strength ups on him, which he's going to do himself, by the time he comes around, he's doing more damage than any of your 5x tunes. So he's just going to be a great person to have all around. He's great for PvP. He's great for raids. He's gear him up.
Yeah, I like Arcus too for raids. I'm often surprised about the amount of damage that he can do, even when he's not a bonus tune. He's sometimes doing upwards of 1-2 million damage a hit. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you take the next one too because my Ares is not leveled up, and I have not really used him in raid. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you think his utility is and why you like Ares for raids.
Sure. So this was another that was given to a few raids ago. Um, and it's just that Ares will is another support tune, and he's one that you're going to have to put on manual mode because you're going to have to kind of babysit him. But he will put on, I believe it's 10 strength ups on one of your allies and give them enrage. So in the right team comps, you're giving your massive damage, and then you're enraging them to do even more on top of,
Well,
and guarantee to do their basic, which was going to be a damage dealing move instead of buffing.
exactly. I was gonna
I
say
love I
that's one
love
of the things that I
enrage.
like about Enrage is that it
Yeah, I
forces
love
the
enrage.
computer.
Yeah.
So the last buff tune, and this is a tune that was reworked recently. The rework was really good and makes her very valuable for raids. Is Hippolyta. Hippolyta can put both strength ups and intelligence ups on your team, shield your team, and she has the double call assist, which we mentioned before. So by being able to buff your whole team with extra strength ups and extra intelligence ups, she is extremely valuable for raids, and I think will be a staple going forward. And then we had sort of a catch-all category, which are, and most of these are leaders. So maybe we could actually call these, you know, staple leaders that you want to have for raids. And again, I'll let you take the lanterns.
I lost you for just a second.
What I was saying is, I'll let you take the first two of the staple tunes that are leaders that are Green Lanterns.
Oh, of course.
Or not Green
Um,
Lanterns, but lanterns, I should say.
of course. So the first one on our list was Atrocitus. Uh, and so back to what I was just saying before with Ares is Atrocitus is going to serve a couple purposes of one, keeping your team enraged, which guarantees that they're going to be doing damage moves instead of wasting your time with buff moves. But he also is going to give you lots of free turns. Um, on his third, when he enrages the team, automatically everybody who gets enraged will take a turn. And then the next time around on his two, everyone who's still enraged will take another turn. He's going to be great to have as a leader for raids, especially against your blue bosses. I wouldn't use him much against anything green, but that will get us into the next one, which is Saint Walker. And then Saint Walker is, fits into a lot of those above categories of uh, he's going to keep your team safe by keeping them shielded and applying overheals. He will call he calls assists, and some people may or may not know this, but if you use his 2 on himself, he will go twice, and then he will usually call 2 more assists, which will essentially give you 4 attacks using 1 move.
Yeah.
So Saint Walker is just a great tool all around. Again, great for raids, great for PvP. And do you want to take this one, or do you have anything to say about?
I was going to say one more thing about Saint Walker, which is he provides a bonus to other lanterns as well. So I think it's 20% to other lanterns, and
I think it's 20% to everyone, and then 25% to lanterns.
Okay. Sorry, I had to mute a sneeze there. Yeah, so basically what he does is he's even powering your characters even more. So especially if you had a lantern right now, like this raid going on that's going to come up, you have 3 lanterns in here. So if you wanted to make them 20% more powerful than they already are, then you can add Saint Walker in there.
Of course. It's going to be fantastic.
All right, the last one that we thought of as a staple toon, and really this is for 2 reasons. So Steppenwolf is, I think, another leader that is really worth making sure you have leveled up for raids. Reason being is, first, he provides all kinds of crit chance ups to your team, which means your team will be doing critical hits more often, which increases your damage production. And then second, and I don't know if they'll do this again, but there was a raid in which it was all based around Scarecrow, and with Scarecrow there were a lot of hit chance downs, and so you had your characters missing a lot. But Steppenwolf helps with that because he provides hit chance ups to your characters. So there's that sort of bonus if they ever go back to that particular raid style with Scarecrow.
God, I hope they don't.
I hope they don't either. That was probably my least favorite. Yeah, I think.
Oh, God,
But either way, and if you don't have Steppenwolf, I would say a nice alternative is Owlman. Owlman does basically the same function as a physical toon, and one bonus with Owlman is you don't have to use the leader slot to get some of that, some of those same abilities. So I think that's all we wanted to say about raid characters, unless you have anything else, Matt.
I would just add one more to the stable toon, and that is going to be Lex.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
He has seemed to be useful in every raid since his rework. So he calls assists, he does decent damage, he keeps your team healthy.
I agree. So survival suit Lex, both turn meter up, intelligence ups, healing, all that stuff really useful, and he was really good when he was a bonus toon.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we get as leaders a lot, either from our members or from other folks that we know in other alliances, is what are the best comps, right? People want to know what's the best comp to use in a raid. And of course, the first part of that is the answer to that question is going to vary from raid to raid, because the solution is not always the same, even though some of the parts of the solution are the same.
Right.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about how do we figure out what is the best comp in a raid? In other words, we're not going to tell you, hey, for the July raid, this is what you need to be using. But we want to give
Right.
you something bigger, which is teaching you how to come up with your own comps for every raid. So you want
Yeah.
to open up the discussion on that?
Sure. And the first is just going to be, trial and error. Just plug in some of your best tunes. If you don't have the bonus tunes, just use the best team that you got. But what I would always suggest is look at the comps of the top that the top players are using. So use that leaderboard feature. Look at the people that are in the top 10. What teams are they using? Are they using Nate Walker and Kellogg? Are they using Guy Gardner and Booster Gold? It might surprise you. It might be a team that you didn't really think, but
Yeah, and
who knows?
I agree. I mean, I will admit to the times that I've looked around and I've said, wait a minute, I see so and so's using this. I wonder what that's all about. And then you figure out something really useful out of that. The other thing that we do as an alliance, so we have a Discord server and we have a dedicated section to raids in our Discord server. And one of our rooms is essentially a room in which we all share comps. And the way we do that is we essentially provide two pictures: is what is the team that we used and what was the damage output on the alliance boss, because that's typically where we're trying to do the most coordination, is with the alliance boss. And so we want to see what's somebody's damage output. And a lot of times we will get people who will say, well, I didn't post anything and I didn't post a comp because I don't have any of the bonus tunes. And my response to that is to say, well, good, because there are other people who may not have bonus tunes and they could benefit from seeing a comp that you're using. And so post what your damage is with that comp, because our goal is to maximize damage output based on what people have.
Right. And so it might not be the most helpful for some of the top players to post in that room because they're just using the best available team. They're already using the meta team. So it's not going to help some of the players that don't have all of those characters unlocked. The thing that's going to help the most is those players that don't have everybody unlocked sharing their information with other players that don't have everybody unlocked.
Yeah. I mean, the real key though is to have your alliance coordinating instead of you can't win a raid by having 30 people being their own alliance. You have to have one alliance of 30 people. The other thing I would say, and we mentioned this before, when you're coming up with comps, using four tunes is not always the best thing. Some people think that you have to put in the bonus tunes, or some people think you always need four tunes. But do you remember the raid where I believe Reverse Flash was the 5x tune?
Yeah, just run them on solo.
We ran Reverse Flash by himself, and it actually worked beautifully. We were clearing bosses so unbelievably fast. I believe that was the raid we got second place. And that's the thing, is like experimentation with comps is, even if you think it's such a outlandish comp to use one, you'd be surprised. You'd be really
Yeah,
surprised.
last raid, the best available composition was just two characters. So we've had one raid where it was just one character. We've had several raids where it's just two characters.
Yeah, so basically the point is to say think outside the box. The other things that we wanted to reiterate was, you talked about the animations, Matt. You want to hit that idea again?
Yeah, so uh, let's just assume that Penguin did do decent damage. The reason you still wouldn't want to use him in the raids is because so many of his moves just take so long to run through animations. And while they might be fun to look at, they're just eating up time on your raid.
Yeah.
and you have time for that. So keep in mind tunes that take a long time to do their move.
The one that came to mind for me, and again, he's not a high damage dealer, so it's not like people would be using him in raids, but watching Red Robin do his basic and how long that takes, that's the kind of
Absolutely.
thing where if you've ever been playing your matches, you think, come on, hurry up. Uh,
Or the opposite would be someone like maybe Huntress, where all of her moves are just real quick.
yeah, bang, done. Um, The other thing that we mentioned that's worth mentioning again is that the computer loves with certain characters to just waste as many moves as possible. And so you want to pay attention to the way the AI works with a character because if you want to be able to run your bosses on auto, uh, there's certain ones you don't want to pick. And you mentioned one in particular, Matt.
Larfleeze. Oh, poor Larfleeze. I don't know how he does it, but he somehow does his buff move every turn on raids.
Yeah, and
In
so
every raid, I'll put him in there thinking, oh, he does tons of damage, and then being reminded that all he does is buff.
yep. And so you're never actually, even though he's a high damage dealer, you're never doing any damage because he's wasting all those turns.
Yeah, it would. He's just wasting time.
So those are some tips of how to think about comps generally because each raid is going to be different. Um, Anything else you wanted to say there, Matt?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
I did want to thank our member Bizarro ETPS for that question because we actually went to our members to say what are some of the questions that you'd like to see us address in this video. And Bizarro ETPS was one of the ones that provided that question. Another question that we get a lot is with respect to resource management and when is it worth it to go for MVP because those things are really closely tied together. And Matt, I'll let you begin the discussion there with resource management and going for MVP.
Sure. So, first off, I would recommend trying to go for MVP on all of your non-legendary bosses, especially the level 51, 68, and 90 bosses. And my specific advice is if you can beat them on one attempt, always play at times 3 or times 5. If you can clear it at times 5, I usually do that. So I'm not taking up some of my alliance mates' uh, boss farms, but we can get to that discussion in a little bit as well.
Okay.
But if you can get at least an MVP level on times 3, you should do that. Because if you get MVP, you're getting 2 energy back. So at times 3, it essentially becomes a free attack, so free points. And at times 5, it's only costing you 1 energy to run through those pretty good reward dealing attacks.
Yeah, so there's really two components to resource management here. One is the energy that you're using. So there's two types of energy in raids. You have the solo boss energy, and that's sort of like a teal light blue color. And then you have the alliance boss energy, which is a red color. And what you're saying, Matt, is if I use three solo energy to attack either a 51, a 68, or a 90, I'm getting 2 energy back if I can solo it and MVP it in one turn. So my net cost is either if I ran it at 5x, which costs me 3 energy, I'm getting 2 back, so it only costs me 1. And if I can do it at
Yeah,
3x, it's free.
exactly.
So
And we'll get on to some of the benefits of finishing that off or sharing it in just a moment. But yeah, that's what I'm saying is you're getting free points or at most 1x points.
Yeah. Because the other thing I think about besides just the energy management, the other thing I'm thinking about is the return on my investment in terms of points. And let me see if I can describe what I mean here. So each boss has an assigned value, and I'm talking about solo bosses here. Each solo boss has an assigned value of how many points it returns if you MVP and beat that boss. So, for example, a level 90 boss, which is typically your energy boss, uh, will give you 1.5 million points towards your solo score if you can uh, MVP that boss and beat that boss. So there's a little bit of math that's going on here because let's say I spend 3 energy to beat a level 90 boss. That's 1.5 million points that I'm getting. Or if you think about it, I'm getting 500,000 per energy I used return on my investment. Whereas the level 68s, and we're not saying don't complete the 68s, and we're not saying don't complete the 51s, but the level 90s typically are your best value because you're getting the most points for energy spent. So, for example, we couldn't remember the exact number for a level 68 boss, but it's roughly 1 million. But if I'm still having to spend 3 energy to beat a level 68 boss, then I'm getting less of a return per energy because I'm only getting 333,000.33 repeating until infinity score for beating that boss per energy. So it's a lower value, but that doesn't mean don't do it. Um, so this is something to keep in mind as we're talking about our strategies because there comes a point in which you have to say, is it worth it to attack multiple times? Because even with a level 90, if I can do more than half the damage on a level 90 in one round, I've guaranteed myself the MVP. So it's still worth it to do the attack, and it's not worth it to continue to attack and waste the energy because I have already guaranteed myself the MVP. So I'd rather share it and let somebody else take it out if I'm in a situation where I can't beat it in one round.
Exactly.
And that applies to the 68s and the 51s as well, and obviously so on down the line as you're trying to get MVP on each one. So, do we want to talk about that in terms of legendary bosses? I know that was going to be our third point, but I think it seems to flow well into this now.
Sure.
So, your legendary bosses are going to be the ones designated in purple, and they are the ones that are the toughest to beat. And most people, in fact, I don't know anyone who can solo a legendary boss in one round of attack. But that's not to say that there's not a strategy here. Matt, do you want to talk about that strategy?
Sure. First, if there is anybody that can knock it out in one hit, let us know.
Yeah. If you can do it in one round, we want to know how.
Exactly. Time saved is money earned. So we're talking about the legendary bosses, and what we're saying is you should only repeat attacks on those if you can do half of the damage within 3 attempts at 5x. So in other words, if you can do half of the damage by spending 9 of your energy, so 3 attacks, it is worth it. If you have to do any more than 3 attacks, it is not worth spending all of your time and especially your solo energy on repeating attacks against it.
Yeah, and do you want to talk about the math behind that and why that's the case? Because it goes back to what I was saying about sort of calculating a value per energy spent in terms of the score that you get.
Right. So the way that I'm looking at it is, do you know off the top of your head how much the legendary boss is worth on that last day?
I believe it's 5 million. It's 5 point, I believe it's 5.5 million with the MVP.
Gotcha. So if you're using 9 energy on that, what is the burn per energy?
Yeah, so if you can beat him in 9, and I'll just use my trusty calculator here. Um, so remember, when we were doing a solo boss at 90, our return was 500,000 points per energy spent. For the um, for the one that gives you 5.5 million at 9 energy, you're getting, let's see, 5.5 million divided by 9. I'm getting 611,111 points per energy spent. And then the question is, why is the cutoff 9? And the answer to that is, if I do 5.5 million and I do one more round will require me to spend then 12 energy. You can see if I divide it by 12 energy, I'm down to 458,333 energy. And so that kind of goes back to
And you're
what you
better off just doing it.
yeah, and that goes back to what you said about time too. Why spend 4 rounds attacking the same boss to get less of a return where I can attack a level 90 boss for 1 round, save time, and get a better return? So the point is to
Exactly.
say is if you can do more than half of the damage on a legendary boss uh, in 3 attempts, then it is totally worth your energy to do it. Um, now, that's assuming you yourself are getting that boss, because there are situations in which, and I'm sure everybody has seen this, where your board starts filling up with legendary bosses. And do you want to talk about, like, using that strategy? How do you decide which bosses you might of other people you might want to attack and try to get an MVP?
Sure. So first off, I'm just going to measure my ability at the beginning of every raid. Last raid, I did not have Artemis up, so I was not prepared. So last raid, I could not do MVP, so I just did not bother with those.
Yeah,
Um,
which means it's not worth it for you to do your own, and it's not worth it for you to try it with other people.
exactly. So after that third day, I wasn't able to MVP bosses, so I just didn't bother anymore. Um, and so the other strategy, which is to just hit every legendary boss that shows up on your screen one time at X energy.
Right.
That you're going to rack up, lots and lots of, points doing that because there's so many of them being shared throughout that 4 days.
Yeah.
So every single time I saw legendary on my board, I tried to attack it at least once.
Yeah, and what you can do is you just go in at 1x because you're not trying to win. You just need to hit the boss once, and then you can exit out and go hit another one. And the reason is that same math applies. Just by doing damage when that boss dies, you will get 500,000 points towards your solo score. So at 1x, you got 500,000 points, which means you only used 1 energy. So it's still a
The
good
same
use.
return as hitting 90 level
E-
boss.
Exactly. Now, let's say I start out a raid and I do have a team that I can MVP solo legendary bosses within 3 attacks. One of the questions might be, well, how do I know when to try to poach an MVP from somebody else and when should I not try? So the first obvious thing is if the boss is already below 50% damage or energy, excuse me, left, there's no point because you cannot MVP it. There's just
Exactly.
not enough damage that can be done. The other thing I pay attention to is I'll go in and I'll look at the person that has done the most damage, and I'll say how much are they doing per attack. And if I see that somebody has already done 3 attacks and they're doing pretty hefty damage, I know I can't catch up to them. There's no way I can catch up. It's not worth it to try to take the MVP. But if I see somebody one tap their own boss and then just shared it, then I will try to take that MVP. Now, there
Yeah,
is a
and
bit of
I think
risk.
that's the best.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said I think that's the best overall strategy, but I think you're just about to get into the risk. So
Yeah, and what I was going to say is the risk can be that somebody gets in there with you and they're doing more damage than you, they're working at a faster pace than you, and you end up, you don't get that MVP. So, although there's a high reward probability, there is a bit of a risk probability in there. The high reward is I can get 5.5 million from doing that boss, and I'm getting a better return per energy spent. The risk is I might spend 9 energy and get not get MVP, and for 9 energy I only get 500,000. So you really got to pay attention to how much damage other people are doing, how much damage can you do per round, and whether it's worth it for you to go for those legendary MVPs.
exactly, and don't base your decisions off of only one round. Know kind of an average of what your team can do, because some pass throughs your team is going to do 30 million, and on the next pass through it's going to do 65 million. So if you have one of those 30 million pass throughs, keep that in mind. That's not always going to be the case.
Yeah,
But after every attack, you do want to look and see how you're comparing to other people that are attacking. If you're way out in the lead, hit it 2 more times. Get your MVP. If there's somebody neck and neck with you or ahead of you, back off. Don't waste 6 more energy.
yeah.
Um, Even at 3 energy, it's still not a bad investment. It's obviously not as good as hitting one level 90 boss, but it's not as as spending 9 energy on it.
And that's where like the less risky strategy is to hit the legendaries at 1x, tap them, and leave. And we have some people in our alliance who don't even attack their own legendary bosses. They'll one tap it, leave, share it for other people to deal with because they're trying to get more points in the shortest amount of time.
And I
Um,
was doing that in the last raid because I couldn't do any damage on my own.
the last thing I wanted to say about resource management, and then I'll give you your chance to say anything you want to say, finish this little section up, um, is that there is a circular pattern to this, or one thing is feeding another thing. That if you can get MVPs on the alliance boss, that gives you solo energy. And if you can get an MVP on a solo boss, that gives you alliance energy. And you should be using that to your advantage. And in fact, one of the things that we've done in our alliance is that we have a schedule the first 2 days to give each player a chance to be able to, if they want, to attack the uh, the alliance boss and gain more solo energy, so they can get as many MVPs as they want within a 1 hour time frame, and then all that energy then allows them to go play their solos. And so this is, but in a general sense, this is the strategy players should be using: is use your solos to feed your alliance and your alliance energy to feed your solo energy.
Exactly. And one thing that I'll just correct you on is you don't even have to be MVP on your solo bosses to get that alliance energy. Um,
Oh, that's
the
right.
way that I farm alliance energy is every time I see a teammate has farmed a boss, and this one I will ignore the level of the boss completely. If a teammate has shared it, I will hit it at least one, because in addition to the rewards that I'll get for that boss being defeated, I will also get one alliance energy back, which is
Yeah.
just going to let me keep helping the team and keep farming more solo energy.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's nice about it is it's a good way to farm green essence too.
Of course. And uh, at some point, when you're done chasing milestones, once you've hit the one that you want, this is the best time to farm your essence. It's the best time to farm your green and your purple essence.
Yeah.
So
So the next thing we wanted to talk about, I knew this would be a long video, but I'd rather do this strategy right than do it fast. The next thing we wanted to talk about was etiquette. This is something that's come up in our own alliance a few times. And when we're talking about etiquette, it's just basically like how should alliance mates be behaving toward each other? And if you don't mind, I'll take the first one and I'll let you take the second one.
sure.
So the first one is don't steal your alliance mates' MVPs. And the reason we talk about this is it's also relates back to resource management because your alliance mates they want to get MVPs on their legendary bosses and on their non-legendary bosses. And if you go in and you steal it, you're stealing their resources, which they can then use for the alliance. And the other thing is, you might not be successful in your attempt to steal their stuff, which would mean you're wasting your own energy and resources. But at a basic level, it's just you shouldn't be doing that to your teammates. This is your
Yeah.
teammate. Now, everybody else in the game is free reign. Steal all the MVPs you want, but not from your teammates.
Yeah, I generally try not to steal from other people, period. But yeah, absolutely not from your teammates.
Yeah, uh, that we have a system which, some people will say, "Hey, I'm not going for MVP on any of these. Feel free to steal any of the ones you want," which isn't really stealing, I guess. Um, but you need to have some sort of system if some folks don't want their MVPs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Do you want to talk about the other etiquette?
Yeah, and that is back to the 51, 68, 90 level bosses. And that is whether you should clean them up yourselves or share them. Generally, I like to keep my board clean, so I like to pass that along to teammates. So I usually try to just go ahead and clear my own bosses. So I'll usually run at 5x. But what I would say is if you either can't beat the 5x or if you're wanting to save a little bit of energy and just run at 3x, what I would say is shot of bosses. Just don't overshare because every share that you give takes up a slot on your teammate's board, and it can either make it harder for them to farm their own bosses or get legendary bosses to spawn. If it's below level 51, you really probably should clear it off yourself.
Yeah, because if you don't know, there are a fixed number of slots you have for your solo bosses. And
20.
so if you're oversharing, you're taking up all your teammates' slots, and you might have somebody that's there farming bosses who doesn't realize you just filled up all their slots, and so they're wasting their energy.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of, maybe that's a good spot to talk about how to farm bosses because that was one of the questions we got was how should I farm bosses?
Sure. So I'm going to break this down into a couple categories of whether or not you are, kind of spending money or gold during this raid or you're not. If you're not spending anything, the absolute best way to spawn bosses is to refresh the last normal node of uh, the campaign.
Chapter
So just
1.
keep chapter one, last node, just keep doing that at 5 energy apiece. That's how you're going to spawn the most boss.
And I
You can
don't,
also get them.
one thing I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, is I don't
You
recommend
get
using the 3x there. You want to do them one at a time.
exactly. And then the other thing that you can do is your heroic grade challenges. So on the Saturday of raids, when you have all the upgrades going on, if you have some character that you're trying to gear up, it'd be a good time to do that and also farm bosses that way. Because bosses can spawn through campaign events, upgrade events. They will also spawn on the hero challenge, who I'm not sure who it's going to be this month. John Stewart, I think. So while his event is going on, if you want to farm his fragments, uh, raid bosses will also spawn.
Yeah, can you say it broke up right as you said the name? Can you say the name again?
I want to say it's John Stewart. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm not looking at the game.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean,
But
basically anything that's PvE will have the chance to spawn a raid boss. And one thing that people run into a lot, by the way, in terms of spawning bosses, you cannot spawn an alliance boss until you have spawned a solo boss or a raid boss. Um,
yes, and on top of that, you also have to go beat that solo boss.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter if you've spawned; you also have to beat it before anything else will show up. I know I'm not the only one who's wasted hundreds of energy trying to spawn bosses at the beginning, not knowing that you had to go beat that one before anything else would show.
yeah,
But the other thing I'm going to say is if you are kind of spending a little bit of gold on braids and you have a lot of energy to spend, especially if you're buying those packs at the beginning, I would recommend farming the last chapter of normal node. It's going to be 10 energy instead of 5, but you're getting much more green essence and it gives you a better chance at collecting rare gear as well.
yeah.
So that's the other distinction I would add.
And by the way, I will say personally, the only money I spend on the game now are I spend the $25 per month to buy those raid packs. And I am getting
Yeah.
so much more back on my investment. It's really worth it. And so I don't consider myself a whale by any stretch. I don't spend a dime on any tunes in the shop. The only thing I spend money on is the raid.
Yeah, the raid packs are one of the best values.
Oh, and one other thing I should mention in terms of research management is I would say doing anything solo on day one and arguably day two is really a waste. And the reason it's a waste is because the points that you get for the energy you're spending, which now it's going back to that same thing, is so low. It's kind of fun to hit a few to get through the first few milestones, but in terms of a value, those low level bosses just aren't worth it. So I hardly do anything days one and two.
Yeah, because they're giving you what 4,000 points for beating them.
Yeah, it's something really low. So it's just not worth it.
I mean, if you
Um,
just wait another day or two, you're getting 500,000 instead of 400.
yeah. So, and it's also a waste of your, excuse me, your energy to try to spawn bosses. Because if you're spending 5 energy to spawn a boss that's worth 4,000 points versus spawn a boss that's worth 500,000 points, it's a big difference.
Exactly.
Let's see. So we had other questions that we got. One of the questions we got: what should the balance be between solo and alliance bosses? This is sort of like a good member question. What would a good member of an alliance do? Um, One of the things that I saw and you've seen, Matt, is that we had past members who made it very obvious they were out for themselves. They would have twice the number, 3 times the number of solo attacks to alliance boss attacks, and to me that's just bad form. Um, I try to make a balance between the two. I'm very cognizant of my score between those two, so that it doesn't look like I'm just out for myself.
Yeah, I would say just kind of keep in mind any alliance standards that your team might have. So if you have some sort of a daily goal that you to be hitting, make sure that you're hitting that. Obviously, before you're spending your time on solos. But what I try to do to balance my strategy is let my board fill up. And whether I'm one tapping those while I'm waiting for that to fill up, I'm constantly hitting the alliance boss. And so I try my best to get one attack every boss while I'm playing. So sometimes those numbers are going to skew a little bit, but I would say I would recommend no more than twice as many solo bosses as alliance bosses.
Yeah. Um, some of the other questions that we got, we have sort of covered. So, one of the questions we got, what should my strategy be if I don't buy raid packs? We talked a little bit about that, doing the 5 energy instead of 10 energy when farming. And we talked about how to farm bosses, which was one of the questions we got. And then one of the big questions that that comes up, and we want to thank Doomsday for this question: what's the best strategy to hit the 70th milestone? I think that goes back to the resource management part of this that we talked about, um, because being able to hit that very last milestone means very carefully managing your resources and using them in the most efficient way possible, and again, not
You're
wasting on
going to want
days
to
one and
use
two.
you're going to want to use everything that we've talked about. You're going to want to make sure that you have the best composition that you can build for yourself. You're going to want to make sure that you're sharing your information with everybody else.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're not wasting 9 or 12 energy trying to take somebody else's MVP.
Yeah, I agree, and I think also the little things, using your energy wisely, getting energy back, return on investment per energy used, that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
then the
be
last,
realistic with abilities.
sorry, could you say that again?
Let's say be realistic with your abilities. If you can't do damage this raid, that's okay. Maybe next raid's for you. Maybe
Yeah,
last raid was for you. You know?
and that's a good point because like there's some raids where I'm just not feeling it. Last raid, I didn't feel like I wanted to go for the 70th milestone. Sometimes I'm happy just getting the rebirth crystals that are, I think, milestone 50, and then
Right.
I do what I can after that, but uh, I try not to put the pressure on myself.
But
uh,
I was rewarded for rebirthing Sinestro last raid.
Say it again.
I said I was slightly rewarded for rebirthing Sinestro.
Yeah, not something I would recommend to the average listener who's rebirthing some Sinestro.
Or Deathstroke.
Yeah. So, is anything that we didn't cover or that I didn't mention that you want to mention? Because we're just a little over an hour here. And I knew this would be a long one. What I'll do is I'll timestamp the different parts of the video so that if people want to be able to just jump to a specific thing that they can. Anything else you
Yeah,
wanted to mention?
I can't really think of anything else that we need to cover. That was a lot of ground there.
Yeah, it was. Well, I appreciate you doing this with me, and I also appreciate all the ways you help with leading the alliance. Um, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Give this video a like. I would really appreciate that. And I do have a Patreon. I will include the Patreon information below. And otherwise, I won't see you next time.